It's a historic day, of course. Donald Trump set to be inaugurated for his second term in office, capping off the most improbable comeback in the history of American presidential politics. He will become, as of about noon today, the second man to serve non-consecutive terms, joining Grover Cleveland in that exclusive club. And I think the interim between terms has probably been a lot more interesting for Donald Trump than it was for Grover Cleveland. And Joe Biden, of course, that means is got everything in boxes by now, I would hope, as he will be vacating 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And Joe is attempting to go out with a bang, it would appear. Have you seen where Joe Biden has just unilaterally decided that he's going to add an amendment to our Constitution? You may be aware there are 27 amendments to the Constitution. And Joe Biden has decided that, you know what? Let's call it 28. 27, 28. What's the difference, really? Let's take a look.
Today, I affirm the Equal Rights Amendment to have cleared all the necessary hurdles to be added to the U.S. Constitution now. The Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land now. It's the 28th Amendment to the Constitution now.
28th Amendment to the Constitution now. Who wants to see me do a keg stand? Getting all fired up here at the end. Look, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I'm here to tell you there is no basis for this. The National Archivist speaking out saying, no, this is actually not the case. The Equal Rights Amendment, let's do a little history lesson here. It was passed in 1972, and it requires 3/4 of the states to ratify any amendment to the Constitution. That means you got to have 38 out of 50, or 76%. And when this went down in 1972, the deadline was set as 1979. You were going to need 38 states to ratify this by 1979 in order for it to go into law, to be added to the Constitution as the 28th Amendment. It was later extended to 1982. It didn't make it. By the end of the extension, there were 35 states that had ratified this, and that's not enough. So it didn't make it. Since then, there have been other states that have passed it, but other states have revoked it in that same period of time. And either way, it doesn't matter, because once the deadline expires, it's expired. So Biden is just making stuff up on the way out. He's doing a lot of stuff on the way out, my friends. Did you see that he pardoned Anthony Fauci? He pardoned Liz Cheney. I guess Liz Cheney's going to avoid the firing squad now. I'm sure Trump had the firing squad all ready to go. She was probably going to be summarily executed later this afternoon if you listen to the Democrats. But she won't have to worry about that now, because she's pardoned, and Anthony Fauci has been pardoned as well. These preemptive pardons, they're not unprecedented. Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon preemptively before he faced legal action that could have landed him in prison or what have you. It's not unprecedented, but Biden has become very ham-fisted with it. We've all seen what he did with his son, Hunter, pardoning him not only for what he had been convicted of, but pardoning him for anything else that he might have done, going all the way back to the beginning of 2014. And now we have pardons. And what is the rationale for it? What is the excuse for it? The excuse is Donald Trump is going to be seeking revenge and retribution. And that, of course, is going to be some horrible constitutional crisis, says the guy who's making up constitutional amendments. If you want to start worrying about constitutional amendments, I'm way less interested in Biden's phantom 28th Amendment Okay? I'm way less interested in that than the 25th Amendment that should have been invoked probably at some point, almost certainly. Let's be real. Because Joe Biden has been partially incapacitated for probably the entirety or virtually the entirety, depending upon how much generosity you want to extend to his brain function, for his entire time in office. We're being told that Joe Biden was fine. Remember that? For like 3.5 years, he was fine. And if you believed your lying eyes, well, then that was on you. Wandering around, didn't seem to know where he was. What's wrong with you? He's sharp and focused. Don't you know that? How many times did we see the talking points, traipsed around cable news? He's sharp and focused. If you're going to go into a briefing with Joe Biden, you'd better be ready to mind your P's and Q's, because that same guy there that you see wandering off is going to pepper you with the most probing questions that you could possibly imagine. Where do I go? Where am I? We were told that this was fake. It was deep fakes and cheap fakes, and just, it was all being made up because Joe Biden was as sharp as a tack. And how dare you suggest that the guy that you see meandering around and stumbling over his words, and oftentimes embarrassingly, remember when he was asked about his age? I think it was on CBS, and he gave the answer where he's like, I'm no soon as a fly. I don't even think about I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck he meant. My daughter was asking me about that the other day. There was no logical explanation for it other than Joe Biden was a man in significant cognitive decline, and they covered it up. It should be considered the greatest scandal in the history of the presidency. A man who was not at himself. The New York Times. Okay? Just basically making excuses for it. His inner circle covered for him clearly. And you don't have to be an expert to know it. Who's really been the president for the last 4 years? Who was in charge? It wasn't Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't even know a lot of the things that he was putting his name to. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, talking about a conversation that he had with Joe Biden that should not only be disturbing to Mike Johnson, which you're about to see him talk about it here in a moment, it should be disturbing to every single American. People denying all this time what we could see on display in public. And now let's peel back the curtain a little bit. Mike Johnson talking about one of the moments where he realized Joe Biden didn't really know what was going on.
Sitting right next to the fireplace in the Oval, and he grabs my arm and he says, "The Speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone?" And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, "Oh, no, he did it." So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office, right over the rug by that coffee table. And I said, "Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard, and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, "Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order 3 weeks ago." And he goes, "No, I didn't do that." And he's arguing with me. I said, "Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that." And he goes, "Oh, you talk about natural gas." "Yes, sir." He said, No, you misunderstand." He said, "What I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG." I said, "No, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people this morning. This is doing massive damage to our economy, national security." It occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed. And I walked out of that meeting with fear and loathing because I thought, we're in serious trouble. Who is running the country? Like, I don't know who put the paper in front of him, but he didn't know.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised? I don't see how anybody who's been paying attention can be surprised to hear that, because I'm sure there are a lot of other instances as well. As I've said many times, I have lost friends since I joined OutKick. People who felt that I was some far right person now because I basically thought critically for myself. And I said things like Joe Biden clearly has dementia. And I have said many times, I don't judge people in terms of who they are as human beings on their political beliefs, within reason. I mean, there's always that 1% extremist who has some belief. If somebody's a member literally of a hate group or something, of course, that's a problem. But I'm talking about the massive majority of us who are just people who have families and lives and go to work and live our lives, and we have disagreements ideologically and philosophically on what the best things are for the country. I don't judge people on that. I never have, never will. But the closest I came to having a little bit of a testy exchange occurred probably back in the spring of last year when a good friend of mine, nice guy, great guy, and I won't name him, but we were talking about politics, and I mentioned that my main problem with Biden is that he has dementia and does not have the cognitive wherewithal, in my opinion, to have the most demanding job that there is in the country. And my friend, who is a smart guy, funny guy, good human being, said, well, he's like, Trump has dementia. I think Trump has dementia. And I said, hey, wait a minute. Look, you don't have to like Donald Trump. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump. We can agree to disagree on policy and what you think. You can think Donald Trump's a bad guy, on down the line. Donald Trump's not a perfect person by any means. Somebody can have that opinion, but don't sit here and tell me that you think Donald Trump has dementia while claiming that Joe Biden doesn't. And within 3 months of that, Biden got forced out of the race by Pelosi and Schumer and the Democratic power brokers because of a debate performance that basically brought the whole house of cards down. If Joe Biden had somehow creaked his way through that debate, it could have creaked his way. If he'd made it to a second debate, he's probably too close to the election for them to have replaced him. But why was that debate so early? Right? That was a very, very early debate. Earliest one that I can remember. It had been years and years and years and years since there had been a presidential debate, Republican, Democrat, that was that far in advance of an election. And I would submit to you, and I think others would also agree with this, the Democrats knew that there might be a problem because they knew that he wasn't playing with the full deck, and they were trying to get by with smoke and mirrors. And they had that first debate because in case Joe went out there and shit the bed, they wanted to have time to replace him. And that's what happened. And everybody is coming around to it now, but where were you a year ago? Where were you 2 years ago, Nate Silver? Nate Silver says the emerging portrait from these Biden postmortems is of a president who didn't have a typical POTUS level of command due to age-related decline, and who therefore was serving as a sort of proxy president for his staff, the groups, quote unquote, or whomever had his ear. See, that's a real problem. First of all, Nate, welcome over here to the people who can look at what's right in front of their nose and see it. But you're a little late for such a smart guy. And for him to say the groups or whomever had his ear, see, that's the problem. Who was really running the country? Ronnie T-Shirts, who is down in Atlanta today for a college football game, would say, well, it was the Obama third term. Other people would say, well, it was these special interests. It was Schumer. It was Pelosi. It was a combination of all of these people. Well, we don't know. We don't know who was really in charge. And see, the thing about Donald Trump is, say what you want about him, like him, don't like him, you know who the president is, you know who's making the decisions. And we didn't have that, and we should never have that, regardless of who the president is. How about this? Remember this? This is one of the moments that troubled me, and this just got brushed off at the time. No big deal. These are the directions for Biden at a basic function. Look at that. Leave that up there, Tim. You enter the room. You take your seat. You ask this question. You thank the participants. You depart. These are like the directions that you would give a slow 9-year-old to try to explain how to navigate their way through a basic situation. Don't tell me, especially knowing what we know now, don't tell me that that's not fucking weird and that any other president that you can think of any party would require being spoken to like somebody who basically is a functional idiot. It's like those notes are like he's special. Who are we fucking kidding? And that was out way before they kicked Joe Biden to the curb. And it was dismissed. All we heard, sharp and focused, top of his game. Joe Scarborough saying, this is the best version of Joe Biden that there's ever been. All of you fucking liars. Fucking liars. In the media and in the Democratic Party. And so that's why, among other reasons, that I was out on the mainstream media, the very fine people hoax. You lied to me. I bought that hook, line, and sinker for like 6 or 7 years. The average American who is paying their taxes and trying to get by and feed their families is not doing investigative fact checking of what they hear on what they think is the credible news. If they hear something on CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, at least for most of my life, I assumed that it had passed the bar of rigor of serious journalism and what was being reported to me was factual. Well, I learned over the course of the last few years that hasn't been true at all. But the average person is not going to go out there and say, well, let me look at the full context of Trump's remarks to make sure that this very fine people thing on both sides that I'm hearing, I want to confirm if it's true or not. We ain't got time to do that in our lives, people. You got to go to work. You got stuff to do. It's not your job. That's what the fucking media is for. It's their job to do this in a serious and responsible way and then bring us the information. When Donald Trump said fake news is the truest fucking thing Donald Trump ever said. And I thought that he was my God, this joker. Fake news, just anything he hears that he doesn't like, he just pretends that it's fake or phony. I thought it's contemptuous. I disliked that about Donald Trump. I thought he was full of shit. Turns out he was right and the other guys were full of shit. And I expect politicians to lie to me. I expect politicians to bend the truth and outright lie, lies of commission, lies of omission. Both sides do it, historically. Let's be honest, but not the media. Not the media. Not the media. I don't expect that from the media. But the culture is changing. The culture's changing, my friends. People are figuring it out. Snoop Dogg, among them. Back in 2017, Snoop Dogg said that anybody who performed at the Trump inauguration, and he was referring to black people, he had some unkind things to say. Look, you can read it. Some of it we've had to blot out. I'm not going to sit here and repeat it. But those were Snoop Dogg's words, and they were pointed. So pointed that we're actually not going to just fully unfiltered say it here. What you see on the right was Snoop Dogg performing at the Crypto Ball last night in Washington, D.C., a gala for the Trump inauguration. 8 years. I don't know. Snoop Dogg changed, Ricky Cobb changed, and the Village People changed. The Village People, they used to say that they didn't want Donald Trump to play YMCA. They didn't like it. Well, da 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 da. Now the fucking Village People are on stage with Donald Trump, and it's a big ass party. The culture is changing. Elections have consequences, and the fraud that has been perpetrated on the American public, people are seeing through it now, including me, including lots of others. You can't hear that sound, but here's a tweet that you can hear. Let me see if I can get this. Is that it? Is it? No. I don't know. No. If you're of a certain age, you didn't need me to do that. Here's something you can hear, my friends. Take a listen to this. Well, how about that? God's favorite university is playing for a national championship tonight. And I think I saw the great Rex Crum up there somewhere playing his trumpet. I'll have to try to confirm that with him later. But Notre Dame and Ohio State is happening tonight. And Timmy, do we have the great one? We certainly do. Let's go now to OutKick's own senior national college football writer, a man who is also NWO for life, Mr. Trey Wallace. Trey, on the scene, on the ground in Atlanta. We got a big one tonight, buddy. Tell me what to expect, brother. I haven't wagered yet. You know, I'm going to start with the lead. 8.5 is what I'm seeing. I think there's a lot of folks who think they're pretty smart that feel like Ohio State is going to win this game by more than 8.5. So let's just go ahead and address the elephant in the room. How should I bet?
I'm just pissed off that you folks from your area brought the cold weather with them where it's 12 degrees outside. So thank you for that, by the way. And I guess
12,
I can say
that's a heat wave. That's a heat wave, brother. It's supposed to get down to -9 here tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, folks, trying to get home. But now the game tonight, man, we're here. We made it. And look, Ohio State is favored by a good amount tonight. I think that when you look at it, Vegas is trying to get you to bet on Notre Dame and trying to get you, okay, you want to take some points here? You want to go with this? I'm not going to lie. I'll come out straight up and say I picked Notre Dame to win the national championship. I picked them to beat Ohio State tonight. Straight up, you know, we can call it money line all we want. I did.
Wait a minute now.
I know.
Look at you making some news here. Okay, now listen, seriously. I did not expect that. I really did not expect that. You think that we're going to get, are we, I mean, you think Notre Dame, all right, first of all, Trey, look, I'm pumped up that you said this. I'm excited now. You can tell.
Okay.
All right,
good.
Give me the blueprint of how Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame pull off the upset tonight that you're boldly forecasting.
Yeah, I think it's Notre Dame getting pressure on Will Howard, the quarterback for Ohio State, forcing him into a turnover or two, and then Notre Dame taking advantage of that with their rushing attack. With Jeremiah Love, you got Price back there. My key factor tonight is Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard. He hasn't had to throw the ball as much this postseason. He's been doing it more with his legs than he has with his arms. And I think tonight, I'm not going to say it's like a coming out party for him throwing the ball, but I will say it's like a coming out party in the postseason for him throwing the football. I think that I don't want to call it like Ohio State's run is coming to an end and going to get plastered. But what I will say is I think Notre Dame's defense, Ricky, has the ability to get after the Buckeyes, especially in the backfield. And if they can stop their rushing attack, because we all know Jeremiah Smith is probably going to get his tonight. I don't know how many touchdowns or how many yards that is, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, if they can force Will Howard into some mistakes, that's where I think Notre Dame takes advantage. People, I get it. No, Ohio State and what they have done this postseason, demolishing Tennessee, demolishing Oregon. You beat Texas in the way that you beat them last week in Dallas. So everybody's like, okay, Ohio State, just that train, that can't be stopped. Well, I'm going to pull like a Denzel Washington from the movie Unstoppable. They're going to somehow pull the lever tonight. Notre Dame is. They're going to get the stop. I think that Riley Leonard is probably going to, I projected this. Riley Leonard's going to hit a touchdown pass in the fourth quarter. It's going to put Notre Dame up. At the end of the day, I think the Irish are the one hoisting the trophy tonight. This Ohio State bubble that we have seen, for the past month after that loss to Michigan, I think it gets popped tonight. There's just too much damn love going to Ohio State. And I get it. I have covered 2 of their postseason games. They are good. But at the same time, we're overlooking a Notre Dame team that after that Northern Illinois loss in that second week of the season, brother, a lot of people have just kind of put on the back burner until they made this postseason run. And it's like, wait a minute. Okay, this is a good offensive team. So, Ricky, that's how I'm playing it out tonight, brother. I think it's Riley Leonard, a quarterback from my neck of the woods, is going to get it done for the Irish. And, we're going to see an upset tonight. And there are going to be some people cashing in out of Vegas that decided to throw a couple $100,000. Me and you can't afford that. But we can at least throw a couple bones on it to maybe make a little bit of money tonight.
The GM of the North Carolina football program. My pleasure to welcome back Michael Lombardi. Mike, dude, General Man, look at you there. The North Carolina gear is on. Bill Belichick is the head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. You are the general manager. Mike, now tell us, because this is new for me. I mean, we're in a new world of college football now in this era. Tell me, what is the role of the general manager of a big-time college football program?
Ricky, first, thanks for having me. You make me laugh every single day. I promise you, I have not given up laughing to your post and our affection for Jim Rockford and some of the things that you put up there. I have to confess, my best friend and I, and along with another friend of ours, we have a text chain going that's really a Ricky Cobb text chain. So we appreciate you. But the job here in North Carolina is no different than the job at an NFL team. You oversee the personnel department. You make sure the scouts understand what we're looking for in players. You start accumulating information on players, whether it's high school kids or whether it's kids that are playing in college. But the way college football is now and the way the draft was, you need data on every single player at an early age. It's the same thing in high school. So that's part of the job. The other part is managing the salary cap, making sure that we're compliant with all the rules and regulations and that we can actually value players at certain positions that we need to have on the team. So it's really no different than working. We're the 33rd team. That's what we consider ourselves right now. We have the greatest coach of all time leading our program in Bill Belichick. He's not going anywhere. He's staying here, no matter how much the media wants to spin it. But I think more that's our competitors nervous about what we're trying to get done here.
Well, Mike, look, you've been clear about this, but I'm going to go ahead and do my due diligence, and we can just breeze through the question. But I got to ask you, Bill Belichick being the GOAT, of course, anytime there's a vacancy in the NFL, and there's a bunch of them now, the rumor mill is going to go into overdrive because Bill Belichick is just a name that people are interested in. You've been emphatic that there's nothing to any of that, but I will give you the opportunity to reiterate that for us right now.
Well, thank you, Ricky. I think one thing everybody could agree on, whether you're a fan of what Bill did in New England or you were a foe because he beat you in New England, the one thing we can all agree on is Bill's really smart, okay? And Bill knows the landscape of the NFL better than most fans do. And if Bill thought there was a job out there that was enticing to him, he would not have made the move to North Carolina. He wasn't looking for a job. He wasn't collecting unemployment. He wasn't hoping to get somebody to hire him. He knew that there was great opportunities if he wanted to go into the NFL. But what he also knew was the NFL is a slippery slope in the sense that it's a lot of politicalness that goes on. You're answering to a lot of different people. There's an agenda within buildings. Bill Walsh told me, Ricky, in 1984, when there were 28 teams in the National Football League, we're only competing against 8 teams here, kid. And he was right then and he's right today. And I think that line right there sums up why Bill's at North Carolina. Not all teams are built to win. Not all teams are chasing the Super Bowl. Not all teams want to do it. They want to win their way, not the right way. And I think that's why North Carolina became so appealing to them, because we can build a program here the right way.
Oh, it's going to be exciting, I think, for me as a fan and lots of fans to see Bill Belichick at the college level. It's a bold new world. I'm sure that's a challenge that both yourself and Bill are excited about. But let me ask you, I got you here. We just had a great slate of weekend NFL playoff action, some damn good games. In fact, that we're interested. We had a couple that went down to the final couple of minutes yesterday. Certainly, let me start with Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders going into Detroit and throwing up 45 points on the Detroit Lions, beating them by a couple of touchdowns. A lot of people now, of course, everybody's got a short memory and there's a recency bias, but you're hearing a lot of talk now, people saying Jaden Daniels, this is the finest rookie season that any quarterback has ever had. How surprised were you, or were you surprised that Washington was able to go into Detroit and just basically just move it up and down the field at will?
Well, when you look at the numbers, Ricky, going in the game, Washington did some incredible things offensively. They matched pretty much. They were, in terms of just taking something that I think is so important, rushes and completions, which tells your team about the execution of what they're doing. It doesn't predict the winner of the game, but when you add how many rushing attempts along with how many completions, that gives you an idea about your execution. And Washington was one of the best teams in the league in that category, along with Detroit. Everything Detroit a better defensive team. I mean, Detroit had a hard time, 28th in the National Football League, in protecting the ball from being thrown over their head, gave up a lot of big plays. We saw that there. And Daniels' ability to run and move in the pocket, I think, kind of exploited one of the things you worry about as a Detroit Lion fan, was their overall speed of their defense. And when you have a quarterback that can run and you're not playing against quarterbacks that can run all the time, that becomes a huge problem. So I thought Detroit would get more control of the game and try to keep this as a 37 time of possession to 23, but they didn't do that. And I mean, Washington made the most. And then look, this is an old Belichick line, but it's still obvious. You have to avoid losing before you can win. I think we saw that yesterday. Baltimore, as they have all year, when they beat themselves. Buffalo won the game. Baltimore beat themselves. The Washington won the win the game. Same thing with the Rams. I mean, look, the Rams give up the 2 field goals late in the game. Both of them are results of turnovers. Stafford's fumble and then Williams' fumble there. If not, they're going to win that game, or at least have a chance. They're throwing the ball towards the end zone at the end. So was the Baltimore Ravens. And unfortunately, Mark Andrews couldn't make that catch. But I think it's disappointing if you're a Baltimore fan, because I think the winner of that game was going to go on places, because those, to me, that was the best matchup of the weekend.
Well, it's a showdown, obviously. Josh Allen now going into Arrowhead, trying to slay the dragon here, the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the things that came up a lot as I was live tweeting the Kansas City-Houston game is the theme that we've seen so many memes about. People talk about it all the time, that Patrick Mahomes gets all the calls. That is the narrative that we have. And, the one roughing call there where the 2 Texans guys collided and they hit helmets with each other, but Patrick didn't take that, but they got the 15. We saw him flopping at one point, trying to draw the flag. I said that Patrick Mahomes gets more calls than the kid who owns the football. I remember growing up in the neighborhood game, you had to be nice to that kid, because if he went home, it was all over. This Kansas City team, only one real loss this year, obviously, because week 17, they were 17th game of the season at least. They were setting everybody. So they've really only been beaten once this entire season. How do you see this one with Buffalo going in there hoping to get the road win to go to the Super Bowl?
Well, I think, Buffalo has the ability to play with them. Their defense, has to play really well. I mean, Baltimore kind of wore them down in the second half a little bit. I mean, Kansas City's so good on third down, the second best third down team. They just find ways to make plays, especially behind a makeshift offensive line with Joe Thuney out at left tackle now, who's normally their left guard. They're just a resilient, tough team, and I think it shows up in the last 5 minutes of all these games. Do they get calls? Yeah, they do. Let's face it. They got 2 calls, but you get calls when you're good, right? You don't get calls when you're bad, and I think ultimately we know Kansas City's well coached. They're good in all 3 areas. I think the demons of the 13 seconds have to get washed away. I mean, last year, Buffalo had a chance to send the game into overtime, and they missed the field goal, and then 2 years ago, they missed 13 seconds. They don't kick the ball in bounds, and they let Patrick Mahomes come back and kick a field goal. They're going to have to play 60 really good minutes, but what we know about Buffalo is if you can't contain this quarterback, he is dynamic. And their run game is much better than people give them credit for. I think this will be a hell of a game, but to me, this is Buffalo's moment. They have Kansas City in the right place. Yes, it's hard to play an Arrowhead, but they've done it before. They just got to close the gap.
Over on the NFC side, the Eagles look like they had the Rams finished off. The Rams made it interesting in the last 5 minutes of that game. Came up a little short. Jalen Hurts, we don't really know the extent of the injury that he suffered there in that game. Washington going into Philadelphia, how do you assess that one, Mike?
Well, they played twice. I mean, the second game down in Washington, they were able to prevail. The Washington Commanders did. But, Eagles had control of that game pretty much for most of the time. I think the third time you play a team is always challenging because you know each other so well. Look, Philadelphia went on a streak during the season where they gained more yards on the ground than they did throwing it, and that's because of Barkley. And they're going to have to control the ball here in this game. I think anytime Washington has played against a good defense, Vic Fangio's done a wonderful job with Philadelphia. They're getting more production out of their defensive ends than they had earlier in the year. I think this is going to be a hard game for Washington. They're the 6th seed, but they're not playing like a 6th seed. To go into Detroit with a little bit of a swagger, to go into Tampa with a swagger, I mean, we've seen it all the time. I mean, this is how Eli Manning's won 2 Super Bowls. He never really did it from home. He did it by going on the road and having that swagger. I think Washington's a dangerous team because they believe in what they're doing. I think Philly played a game where I think weather impacted it. Certainly they made plays down the stretch when they needed it and they got off. I thought Jalen Carter getting single blocked on that play or really misassigned, that was the difference in the game. If they blocked Carter, they might have won that game.
Mike, we're here in Chicago. I've been joking. The Bears are interviewing everybody. I don't know what the number is, but it seems like every day there's 1, 2 names. We're well up. I think we're somewhere between north of 15 maybe that the Bears have publicly said, we have interviewed head coaching candidate so-and-so, so-and-so. I don't know how much confidence I have in the Bears to make the right decision, but I certainly think the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft, made what is clearly on its face a great decision bringing in Mike Vrabel, who of course won 3 Super Bowls in New England under Bill Belichick. What are your thoughts on that hire and what Mike Vrabel can do for the Patriots going forward?
Well, the Patriots kind of went the opposite of Belichick's program. They wanted a kinder, gentler, make everybody get along, have collaboration. We're going to have, all these people are going to help Gerard Mayo and he's going to be around. And they realized that the reason why, as we look on Washington today with the presidential transition of power, we realize that they've never dedicated a monument to a committee in Washington. And I think that's exactly what the New England Patriots under Robert Kraft have learned. And so they've streamlined the organization. Robin Glaser, she left. She was intimately involved in what they were doing there before, but now she's not there. And they've given the keys to the store back to Mike Vrabel. He brought Ryan Cowden in to be his personnel guy to help him at least. So I think that 1 year of being nice and friendly and going to Dairy Queen after the game kind of put a sour taste in their mouth. And I think Mike's an outstanding coach. I really do. I think Mike's going to do a tremendous job for them, along with a young quarterback, a North Carolina graduate. He was just here this weekend celebrating his engagement over at the Carolina Inn. So we're rooting for him here in Carolina. We love Drake May, and I'm rooting for them, and I'm rooting for Mike because I think Mike will get it straightened out.
Well, Mike, it wouldn't be having you on the program if we didn't cover at least one tweet. And I can think of one coach that I don't think ever took anybody to Dairy Queen after a game. And that
Yes.
would be this man.
General Robert Montgomery Knight.
Yes. Yeah. This next song's called Fuck Purdue, Fuck These Referees, Fuck My Players, and Fuck You Too. And it goes like this. So
I loved it. You
no
made me laugh out
nonsense.
loud on that
Yeah.
one, Ricky. I love it. I was so fortunate, when Belichick came to Cleveland. One of the reasons Bill Belichick got the head coaching job at the Cleveland Browns in 1991 was before Belichick's plane landed in Cleveland, the plane that we sent to pick him and his wife up and the family. When that plane landed in Cleveland, Robert Montgomery Knight called Art Modell at his home in Waite Hill and said, "Let me tell you, Mr. Modell, I grew up a Cleveland Browns fan. I grew up in Orrville, Ohio, the home of Smucker's Jelly. I used to sit in the top bleachers, watch the Indians play and watch the Browns play. The greatest coach that you could ever hire is Bill Belichick, and he just landed in Cleveland. Go hire him." That made him hire him. And then we would go spend time with Coach Knight down in Bloomington when he was coaching. And it truly was one of the greatest experiences to learn how he motivated players, how much detail went into it. I still think about the incredible ball boys on that basketball court at Indiana, the Hoosiers. It was like a precision. It was unbelievable. He would say free throws, and the next thing you know, there were 8 ball racks coming out of somewhere. I don't know where the hell they came from, but they were lined up and guys were shooting free throws. It was orchestrated to a T, and I'll never forget it. So when you posted that with that plaid jacket up there, I think of the Sports Illustrated article by Frank DeFord where Watch Rabbits Run. If anybody's never read that, you should go back and Google it online. Tremendous article about Coach Knight.
Yeah, that is a great call. It is. Is there a challenge here, with Bill going from the pro level to the college level, even though the college level has more of a professional model? As Bill said, this is a pipeline to the NFL. You said earlier, you guys see yourselves as the 33rd franchise. Is there any sort of difference stylistically for Bill, do you think, in dealing with, a team full of 20-year-old kids as opposed to NFL players?
I think obviously, we have to teach them how to become professionals, right? An amateur does things every now and then. A professional does them every day. An amateur is satisfied with wins. A professional is satisfied with the process. So we have to teach them that now that they are getting compensated for their play, what it's like to be a professional. And so the messaging is going to be the same. It's the same thing we have to do when we get kids from college that came into our pro program. We have to educate them on what it's going to take to do your job effectively. Now, we also have to do it in a different way in terms of academics, and as a human being, we've got to teach them too. But Bill's always been a great recruiter. He really has. The media doesn't know that because they never get to see that side of him. But Bill's honest, he's direct, and he explains things very clearly. That's why he's such a great coach. So we'll be able to handle that, and I think the messaging will stay on course. We think we have one of the greatest universities in the country in North Carolina. It's one of the hardest schools to get into. They only take 2% out of state. So that's how hard it is to get in this school. So we have a great school with a great history, and we do have the greatest defensive player that ever played the game in Lawrence Taylor representing us.
Yes, in fact. Yeah, absolutely. LT, the greatest player in the history of that. So there's a connection certainly there with Bill Belichick as well. Mike, a pleasure always having you on the program. Congratulations on the new gig, and wish you all the success in the world down there.
And just keep making us laugh. We've got the group chat. I'll make sure you know it. And Mac, if I ever had your cell phone, I would put you in it to thank you. We appreciate it, Ricky. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah, I'll get that number to you, Mike. Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, OutKick fans on YouTube, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and make your way over to OutKick.com where you can watch the full episode.